action, rules you don. The email began with rules. No greeting, no signature, just a bulleted list like a dare written by So. Don't announce yourself to the hoe. Don't say your full name anywhere. If a corridor is longer on the way back, keep walking until your name feels wrong. Do not open any door that appears we're there. Do not, under any circumstance, go down to the basement. Then an address, coordinates that didn't quite line up on my phone map, and one line of motive. Paying for an acoustic echograph of the interior. 1N. I make a living from silence. More exactly, from recording it. I'm an acoustic archivist. Museums and movie studios hire me to capture the shapes of rooms. The way a 19th century parlor eats whispers. The soft velvet swallow of a theater curtain. The brittle clap of a drained pool. You'd be surprised how much people will pay for calibrated hush. I told myself the rules were a prank, but I packed like they were scripture. Measuring tape, compass, 2 analog watches I could afford to lose, extra batteries, my boom mic and recorder, chalk, and a thermos of coffee that always tastes like a lie by midnight. I also brought a spare pair of shoes, because superstition lies in TH. The road turned from asphalt to gravel like a sentence, changing its mind. Pines arched overhead, shutting out sky, and my cell signal died a dignified death. The address deposited me at a rusted gate. Beyond it, a house stood as if it had been told to stand there and hadn't considered any alternative. Tall, gabled, a skin of gray wood that wore rain like a memory, windows too dark for afternoon, the sort of porch where promises once sat and curdled. My watch said 2:14 p.m. The air said later. I reached for the gate. It opened before I touched it. I don't claim second sight or any kind of gift. I put things on tape and I write them down. Still, I hesitated because something in the sound of the opening gate carried intention, like the drawn breath before a phrase. Room tone, I said out of habit, and clapped once. The echo came back from farther away than the yard. I walked in. I didn't use my name, part I, the house with the low hum. The foyer greeted me with a smell I couldn't place at first: iron and starch, and paper folded too many times. A low hum swam under it, the kind you feel in your teeth more than you hear. Refrigerators hum. Old transformers hum. This was older, patient as an organ drone under a funeral hymn. The rules lay under a glass dome on a side table, written in block letters by 4 or 5 different hands. That told me the rules had been copied and recopied, the way children learn prayer's repetition, until the shape of the words holds, even if the meaning leaks. I clipped the mic checked levels, said my routine. Room tone, take one. The hum shifted to meet me, like a singer finding harmony. My needles jumped and settled, but the waveform showed a smear I couldn't name. I clapped again. The return arrived late, as if the sound had to take a longer hallway to get back. The ground floor divided politely. Library left, dining room right. A corridor ahead with wallpaper so faint it seemed embarrassed to be looked at. I measured the library, north wall 16.2, east 14.9, then blinked, and the first number wasn't true anymore. Under my tape, the baseboard breathed in and out the width of a pencil. I wrote it anyway. You write down moving things, so the motion has to argue with ink. The dining room wore mauve wallpaper patterned with flowers, except every fourth bloom had been rubbed out. Eraser crumbs glittered on the wainscoting. I touched one finger to an erased circle. The paper there was worn, as if someone had just finished removing it and left heat behind. When the first word came, it wasn't through my ears. It arrived behind my molars and pushed forward until it was almost a whisper. Stay. I did the mature, professional thing and pretended not to hear. Part Roman 2. Don't announce yourself. Upstairs, the hallway bent in agreeable, confusing angles like a polite person who never quite lets you pass. I counted 13 steps from the landing to the first door and 13 back, but my legs said 15 in one direction and 11 in the other. The rules said not to correct stairs out loud. I kept my thoughts behind my teeth, where the house could hear them anyway. Bedrooms carried tide lines of old furniture. A wardrobe held its breath. A vanity mirror reflected the room with the mild delay of an absent mind. Dust hadn't settled in the obvious patterns. Instead, my footprints found paths already prepared, as if the house had saved a route for me. Mid-hall, a door had appeared where there hadn't been one. Waist high, child size, brass keyhole winking. My spine performed the universal mammal pause. The fourth rule: do not open any door that appears where there wasn't one before. I did not open it. I knelt and put my ear to the wood. I heard knocking, 3 raps, a pause, 2, a pause, then 1. The cadence of the simplest game. I tapped back on the board with my fingernail. 1, pause, 2, pause, 3. The door breathed no air, but the idea of it. The hum climbed a note to match my heart. Then, from the space behind that tiny door, a voice assembled itself out of paper and patience. Bring me back the names. My mouth tried my name, found it suddenly ill-fitting, and closed. Part Roman 3, Kitchen Archaeology. It helps to do a task your hands understand when your head wants to run. In the kitchen, I boiled water on a gas stove that exhaled in syllables. Out the back window, a yard of tangle and a stand of trees. Beyond them, something paler than forest, like a field or a memory of one. The low hum filled the kitchen, louder in the floorboards than the air. Under the table, the wood carried scratches. I lay on my back and read with my fingers as much as my eyes. Names carved where a bored child might hide secrets. Adele, Henry, Lucia, John, Annie. Tamsin letters cut deeper, as if the knife had been a little angrier that day. I said one name out loud. Adele. The room's temperature didn't drop, it pressed closer, like a crowd drawing in to hear. The hum flickered, pleased. At the edge of my sight, a small shape crossed the pantry glass and paused, as if remembering how to be a person, then thinned out into shadow. Names, I said. What for? No answer. Only the kettle beginning to sing. Behind the bathroom mirror, I found a nest of letters bound with fraying twine, all addressed to the house in children's hands, sealed but unlit, as if the writer thought glue could bite. I held one to the light. Lines didn't travel straight across. They curved toward the right margin and disappeared into it. When I opened a different envelope, a drawing slid out. A rectangle with a smaller rectangle inside and a circle within that. The circle had teeth. I put everything back and washed my hands twice, part Roman 4. The meadow that wasn't yesterday. Morning arrived with the sheepish light of a guest who overstayed. In the library, the window no longer showed trees, but a pale meadow furred with frost. A path had pressed itself through the grass to a second house that looked like a sketch of this house, done by someone who thought shadows were details. Tall, narrow windows, roofline lifting at one corner like a shrug, front door ajar. I stepped closer to the glass. The second house stepped back. I blinked, and it was gone. I blinked again, and it was there, nearer. I checked my watch. The second hand vied with itself, leaping and settling, then slipping backwards one tick, bashful. The rules did not mention meadows that appeared overnight. The rules, I realized, were only the rules someone thought to write down. I told myself I would only go as far as the weedy verge to take ambient sound. The path felt under my boots like dough waiting for a handprint. The meadow smelled green and metal, like pond water remembering a fence. 10 paces in, the second house stood at the path's end, as if it had always planned to be. I didn't announce myself. I reached for the door with my sleeve over my hand, like a superstitious burglar. Inside, the foyer had no dust and no patience. On the table under a glass dome lay words the house likes, lettered in 3 hands. Lintel, mullion, plinth, sill, banister, quine. At the bottom, a child biggest crooked letters, Mara. I hadn't told the house who I was. The hum in this house wasn't a hum. It was a rehearsal. I left without climbing the stairs, because I knew if I did I'd find the room I'd just come from. And on the bed, an open recorder I had not left. Back in the first house, the library looked at me with the flat friendliness of someone who has already made up their mind. On the desk sat a wooden puzzle box whose inlays rearranged themselves when I wasn't looking. Inside lay thin discs of some not quite vinyl, labeled in an adult's assured hand. Room 1, listening. Room 2, practicing. Room 3, answering. Basement, don't. I did not play them. I absolutely did not. I did. The needle found groove with obedient ceremony. The speakers gave me the library as it should be, and as it was not. An echo faithful to geometry instead of appetite. Then my voice said hello. I had not said hello. The house said it back, my vowels a hair wider, as if tried on in a mirror. I shut the player off. The silence that followed wore a smile. It did not need me to see. Part V, knock once for yes. The second night outstretched its legs and cracked its knuckles. From the ceiling above me, faint tapping began. Not Morse, not any code I knew, but code anyway, because meaning lives wherever repetition moves in. I tapped back with the blunt end of a pen. The rhythm shifted until it sounded like clapping games from playgrounds I had never visited in this town. In my recorder, I heard the taps, and underneath them a breath. Not mine. Bring me back the names. The breath wrote in the silence. What do you do with them? I asked the ceiling before remembering that speaking out loud gave words to walls. Keep them from spilling. And if they want to leave, the breath did not answer. The floorboards did. A slow expansion, like a jaw unclenching. Part VI, what the basement wants. On the third morning, the bathroom door had relocated to the wall to the left, which was helpful in the way a cat bringing you a bird is helpful. An offering you didn't ask for that proves you are noticed. On the fourth, a stranger knocked at noon. He wore a fluorescent utility vest and the grim cheer of a county employee. Clipboard in hand. Boundaries, he said through the screen door. We've had some complaints about encroachment. He said the last word as if it too might be a boundary problem. Something in me sprang like a latch. His name tag read Jon in stamped letters. I thought of the knife-cut Jon under the kitchen table and did not say his name. Perimeter first, he said, relieved I wasn't going to make him come inside. He walked the yard. I watched from the library window, hands flat on the glass. The meadow wasn't there until he reached the back fence. Then the grass sighed outward into pale, and the path presented itself like an unrolled ribbon. The second house raised its head. "John," I said, breaking a rule and feeling the house catch my name with interest. He looked up. We waved at each other through a space that suddenly felt much longer. He lifted his clipboard in salute. He stepped onto the path. I banged the window with my fist. He smiled politely, the way people smile when they've already decided to leave a conversation. He took another step. The second house accepted him like a card into a deck. He was not there anymore. The hum in the walls lowered until it barely moved air, but pressed on the bones in my ear. I learned the basement because grief always teaches you where down is. The door had appeared not where any architect would put it, but where a house would, in a place the body wasn't ready to see one. The knob turned like a wrist. Stairs unrolled in shallow, confident steps. Every fifth tread announced itself with a tiny pop, as if sealing a promise. I told myself I would not go all the way. I would stand at the fifth, lean, listen, leave. The first rule I learned in music school applies to haunted houses. A sustained note wants to resolve. The hum down there had resolve in mind. The basement wasn't damp, though it smelled like wet paper. Its walls did not meet the floor in innocent corners. They met in small mouths, hundreds, each with neat white teeth that opened and closed just enough to shape consonants against the hum. In the middle, a stone well, not water, a well of attention. Around its rim, names had been carved with knives, nails, rings, patience. Adele repeated until the letters grew lazy. Lucia cut with love. Jon once, traced over, then gouged out. Tamsin so deep I could lay the pad of my finger in the groove and feel the echo of anger. I leaned over and made the animal mistake that sends stories down the wrong roads. I said my name. The well said it back with the glee of a teacher whose student has finally understood the assignment. The mouths in the walls tried my vowels and then got them right. The floor molded itself to the shape of my shoe, as if I were a stamp. For one long, unbearable second, I belonged to the house. "Stop," I said, and the house halved its pressure in the way a parent does when they're showing you they can but aren't obliged to. I climbed. Each stair checked me like a bouncer who'd seen me once before and wasn't certain I deserved entry the second time. I did not sleep that night so much as hold still, while the house learned the tempo of my breathing and practiced part Romans 7, the night of doors. At 3:13 a.m., I looked because the body likes to know what time it was. For the story later, every door upstairs opened at once. Not with drama, gently, with the mutual courtesy of guests rising from a table. The hallway air-cooled. Behind the first door lay a summer kitchen flooded with light no July on this latitude could manage. Peaches sliced so thin on a plate they browned as I watched. Behind the second, parlor with a piano that played scales determined never to return to the tonic. Behind the third, a closet of shoes all arranged heel to toe, except for one absence at the end, two ovals of untouched dust waiting for a pair that had left and not come home. I placed the recorder on the hall floor and whispered, room tone, take two. The house, indulgent, presented a silence so clean it only could have been designed. Then it layered in its hum like a bass line. Names, I said, because stories like this become prayers sooner than we think. You want names. We keep them from spilling. The chorus of mouths shaped the sentence like children reciting from a reader. Do they want to spill? The corridor lengthened half a step. The doors breathed. Mara is for staying, the house said. And this time it was not the mouths or the hum or any trapdoor voice. It was my voice returning to me, translated into permanent. Something in me looked at the underside of my own name and didn't recognize the carpentry. I shut every door I could reach. They opened politely again. I laughed, the kind of laugh that wears its own apology. Enough, I said softly. And for the first time, the house obeyed not out of strategy, but out of the odd courtesy that sometimes passes between a room and its person. Part Roman 8, returning what was borrowed. On the sixth day, the pantry door would not open. Behind it, a thin song, tuneless, dogged. I wrote Adele on a slip of paper and slid it under. An hour later, the paper was gone. In its place, a small ring of damp pulp, like the chewed pith of an orange. Under the table, the Adele carving had worn smooth around the edges, as if a small palm had pushed its whole weight there over and over. I set my hand in the groove and said, Adele, you can go. The house breathed out. The pears on the sill changed smell from sugar to air. The hum retuned 1 cent higher. On the 7th, chalk letters appeared on my slate in a hand that looked like mine, if mine had learned left-handed under constraint. Bring them all back. I can't, I said. I don't know how to untie a well. Bring them back. The meadow brightened in the window like someone had wiped it with a sleeve. Out there, further down the path, behind the second house's shrub, a third house waited with the mild patience of something that expects to be visited. Words the house likes, I murmured, thinking of the list under glass in the other foyer. I wrote on my own palm as if inking could persuade wood, lintel, mullion, plinth. The house hummed approval as if correct answers were treats. What about your name? I asked. What do you call yourself? The hum paused, then dropped its shoulders. We are what returns. A beat, we are what stays. I went to the library window and touched the glass where the meadow pressed. Then, here's one for you, I said, and tried the first thing that felt true. Harridge. I didn't know where the word came from. Maybe a deed book someone carried through my head when I slept. Maybe a fading plaque. Maybe the house had been leaning on the syllables the whole time, and I finally had the sense to feel it. The hum accepted the name with the relief of a misfiled paper put back where it belonged. Harridge, I said again, you can go. The second house stepped back a foot. The third blurred. The path's edges softened. I said the name until it lost meaning and became a handle. Something in the library relaxed that had been braced since I arrived. That night, I slept. The house kept its hands to itself like a kid promised a story if they don't fidget. In my dream, the well held water when I woke. My cheeks were wet like there had been a breeze. Part Roman 9. The house next door learns faster. The morning tasted like relief until it didn't. My watch lay on the desk, ticking backward. The puzzle box had moved to the floor under the vanity, as if it had hidden itself from embarrassment. The discs inside wore new labels, this time in the emphatic scrawl of a hurried adult. Room 4, lending. Room 5, learning. Room 6, leaving. Leaving, I repeated. I would like to. The front door opened on the first try, no drama. Just an ordinary swing and a whiff of porch. I walked out with my bag packed and my recorder around my neck like a travel charm. The yard had reclaimed a proportion I recognized. The trees were trees. The gravel road was a road. I made it down the steps and across the grass and through the gate and 10 feet into not the house. Then the second house lifted its head in the meadow like a pond creature, making a ripple, and the hum arrived in my pocket from the recorder I had turned off. Bring us all back, not them, us. I did not run back to the porch because I didn't want to teach the house how I run when I'm scared. I walked with great dignity into the foyer and set my bag down like someone arriving late for a meeting. You don't need me to stay, I said to the walls. You need practice. We need names that don't spill. The sentence came from the stair riser, the radiator, the gap under the parlor door. We need a mouth that says them without losing them. You want a librarian. The house considered. We want a room that remembers the shape of people. We want the word that holds them to itself. And you want me to be that room. Mara is for staying. The name did not wound anymore. It itched where skin heals too fast. I went to the kitchen, opened the junk drawer every house keeps, and found chalk, string, 2 nails, and a deck of cards with 13 hearts missing, but all the spades. On the table, I drew a circle and wrote the names I knew Busha, Annie Henry John Tamsin, and Harwich at the rim like a seal. Practice with these, I said, palm on the chalk. Say them until you can say them without making them stay. Say them the way water says the names of stones. The hum reshaped itself around my words. The mouths upstairs closed and opened in new shapes. In the pantry, the tuneless song found 2 notes and kept them. Good, I said, surprised to hear the teacher in my own throat. Again, part X, the longest walk. On my last night, because I had decided there would be one, I left my bag by the door and my spare shoes under the chair because superstition needs small altars. I lit a candle and crossed the upstairs hall slow enough for the house to lean in without knocking me over. Doors breathed, but did not open. The small, child-sized door I had refused to open the first day had aged. It wore a neat seam as if a seamstress had hemmed it. I put my ear to it. No knocking. A hush with weight in it. The kind of quiet kept by rooms where babies finally sleep. Good night, I whispered. The house hummed a benediction, then added softly, basement. I said no, please. I took the candle and went down. The stairs counted me like a metronome. The mouths in the walls shaped thank, but could not yet make you without swallowing the why like a bead. At the well lip, someone, something that had learned from someone, had cut a new name. Not mine. The groove was small and careful. Eliza. The C wavered as if a hand unused to CS had tried more than once and chosen all the tries. Eliza, I said, and felt a child weight lean against my leg. I can't take you out, I told the air that had learned to listen. I can only remind this place how to say you without keeping you. Eliza, the house said, and this time it didn't push, it didn't hold. It let the name vibrate against the air, like the note at the end of a song you don't want to end, then permitted it to fade. I cried the clean cry of people who have finally been allowed to put something down. The candle guttered. I shielded it with my hand. From the far curve of the basement, where shadow allows itself theater, a woman's outline unstitched from the dark. Not the horror figure you brace for no dripping, no stunt facial geometry, just a long dress and a posture that remembered holding weight. She inclined her head in a gesture that had been taught young. Harwich, she said, and the word in her mouth sounded like home, if home were a noun you could cut your finger on. Go, I told her, please. She did not vanish. She moved her weight from one foot to the other, and in that movement turned into air that knew where else to be. I climbed. The house did not try to keep each step. It learned how to let me make noise without promising to learn it forever. At the top of the stairs, the candle went out. The hum briefly stopped. The silence that followed was not empty. It was correct conclusion, the borrowed voice. I left at first light, which had the decency to arrive on time. The gate opened with polite muscle memory. The road remembered how to be rode. My watch ticked in the direction we agree matters. I did not look in the rear view because some stories prefer you not to. Payment hit my account before I found a signal. The email thread deleted itself, or I deleted it. I can't remember. The recordings were both worthless and precious. The rooms I had wanted to map refused to be captured. The house had recorded me instead. When I played the tracks back, the waveforms looked normal until my voice appeared where I had not spoken, or didn't appear where I knew I had. In one file, at 03:13:07, a door opens with the exact sound of a melody resolving. In another, a child says Eliza so lightly you might mistake it for dust moving 3 months later, because curiosity is just grief that never learned to sit down. I drove out that way. No house, no gate. A field of switchgrass rippled in a wind that seemed to remember the shape of porches. The only human thing was a mailbox leaning drunkenly, its mouth open. Inside, one envelope. Thick paper, no stamp, addressed in careful block letters to the house. I slid it back where it had been and closed the box softly the way you close a crib. At home, when the apartment settles for the night and the radiator explains itself with little bangs, I hum once and listen for a harmony I hope not to hear. Some evenings, behind the cupboard with the spare bulbs and batteries, I think I can make out the faintest practicing. Lintel, mullion, plinth, sill, banister, quan, in a child's stubborn voice. And then my name trying shapes it, no longer fits. I hum back a note that means no and thank you in a language rooms, and people share. A week after the field visit, a small wooden box appeared on my doormat. No one saw who left it. No carved inlays that rearranged themselves. This one was shy wood with a finger-polished lid. Inside lay a single disc, thin as a flake of slate. No label. I set the needle and lifted the volume by degrees like peeling gauze. Room tone. Not this apartment's. The library's. Then a breath. Then a woman's voice, the texture of linen. Mara is for leaving. I laughed like someone who had been holding a joke in their pocket since childhood. Thank you, I said out loud in my kitchen, because kitchens forgive that kind of behavior. On the recording, a child's voice tried thank you and stumbled adorably over TH, then got it right. Silence followed, not empty, but satisfied. A chair slid across a floor with a light scrape of an apology accepted. I shut the player off and put the disc back in its bed. Sometimes I take the box out and let my fingers rest on the lid the way we touch photographs we are not sure we are done with. Sometimes I don't want it in the room, and put it in the hall closet behind the winter coats so the apartment can pretend we are alone. Sometimes late, when the city carries itself like a tired animal, I hear a distant practicing that resolves perfectly on a note I don't know how to name. Last night, a letter slid under my door without footsteps to apologize for it. Heavy paper, block printing I recognized. To the house. No envelope, just the words and a small drawing of a rectangle within a rectangle with a circle inside. The circle had no teeth this time. It had a handle. Under the drawing, in a meticulous hand, if the corridor is longer on the way back, keep walking until your name feels wrong in your mouth. When it does, you've arrived. I folded the letter and put it with my lease, because the only way to live with certain rules is to file them under paperwork. Tonight, as I write, my apartment is behaving. The walls are ordinary. The windows court only their own reflections. The radiator has chosen a rhythm that makes sense. My recorder sits on the table, facing the room like a priest absolving furniture. I press REC and say, room tone, take one. From the speaker, a hum answers, not a drone, not a hunger. A note held well that wants to resolve where it should. It sounds like a house somewhere else learning to say Eliza and Harwich and Mara without keeping them. It sounds like a field practicing being a field. It sounds like leaving. And then, because endings want their own weather, the recording catches a shape of quiet I don't own, and a voice that has borrowed mine for just a second says, almost shyly, we remember